So I recently had the question on why is socialism a flawed economic system? Well, to answer briefly, socialism is deeply flawed because it reaches so far outside the bounds of human nature. It goes outside the bounds of economic reality. It tries to defy the laws of supply and demand. Socialists try to argue with market-driven prices, etc., etc., and they're faced with things like the knowledge problem, the economic calculation problem. They think prices are merely just something that are there as an obstacle to getting things that they want. They don't understand that prices are signals, and they are the most important pieces of information for the operation of an entire economy. And if you don't have the information of profits and losses, there's no possible way for you to operate an economy efficiently. And you don't know what the consumer, out of millions of different people, because you're thinking about Great Britain's population alone, 65 million people. How the hell do these central planners, how the hell do these socialists know the individual's needs and wants out of 65 million people? And even supercomputer technology can never solve the problem of the economic calculation problem, resource allocation, because they end up destroying the information of prices. Then of course they're faced with that serious issue where they don't know how much to produce, what resources to use more of, what to stop using, what to produce more of and stop producing, etc., etc., what to invest in, stop investing in. All of these things, they don't hold any of that information. In the natural state of socialism, never mind their theoretical nonsense, they try to get rid of the private sector, but you've only got one element there that can get rid of that. That is the government. So they end up giving more and more power, more and more dependency upon that of the state. Overtakes that of the private sector through nationalisation, and it can only do that through coercion, because it's not done through negotiation. And what if some private landowner or private business owner says, no, I'm not giving up my private property? What are they going to do then? They can't do anything. So the only way that nationalisation can take place is coercion. It's not a case that a Bernie Sanders or a Jeremy Corbyn can take them there. They have to get there through the use of a dictator. And this correlates then to the argument on the printing press. There's a difference between the theory of socialism and how they think things will work out theoretically to that of in practice. So in practice, they're going to be faced with a serious inflationary problem. Society is going to end up breaking out, protests, etc., etc. And when they're faced with the serious inflationary problems, this is why it requires the specific type of character, the dictator, who's going to forcibly take them in that direction. He's not going to do a reverse, he's not going to do a 180 turn. He's going to continue on nationalising, ignoring the economic reality of the inflationary problem that they're faced with. In economic reality, with regards to a market economy, so in a market economy, you're faced with fluctuating prices. You're faced with prices that through the laws of supply and demand, certain prices will be higher than others. Of course, they don't understand prices, and you could see that in the housing market today. So when it comes down to that of socialists, they don't accept higher driven prices, right? They don't accept that for the life of them. They call it greed. That's proof that they don't understand prices. Okay, higher prices in the market are not greed. Prices are signals. They're information telling the market where there's a shortage and where there isn't. That's why I say that socialists try to defy the laws of supply and demand. They don't understand what prices are. When socialists see higher prices and they think of that as greed, they try to control it. They try to control prices above market value, or even try to control prices below market value. So they're control freaks when it comes to the economy. They try to control prices above or below market value, and the natural state of that is that it ends up with the economic calculation problem, because you're distorting the information of profits and losses. If you don't hold the information of profits and losses, there's no way for you to know what resources to use and stop using, where to allocate them and stop allocating, etc., etc. And you end up with creating a serious economic crisis. You end up creating surplus waste and shortage problems, because that's the natural state of what happens with the price floors and price ceilings. Of course, there are consequences for their actions. In correlation to the economic calculation problem that they're faced with, arguably one of the biggest faults of socialism is in relation to do with the printing press. This is the reason why Margaret Thatcher said the problem with socialism is you'll eventually run out of other people's money. What was she meaning by that? Well, at the end of the day, money can only come from the two places, the private sector or the printing press. So if you're going to try and get rid of the private sector, you're practically getting rid of the very sector of the economy that finances the economy. That's who the taxpayer works for. Now, it requires a great level of ignorance to think that the public sector finances itself. It doesn't. They don't generate enough to pay that tax money, so they're paying a rebate to that of government. Government's the one paying their wages. So the public sector is obviously, financed by the government. But where is the government getting the money from in order to pay their wages? Well, the government is obviously taking it from the private sector taxpayer. And if it's not from the private sector taxpayer, they're running the printing press. So at the end of the day, they're faced with this serious economic crisis because they're trying to get rid of the private sector. So they're left running the printing press. And again, they don't understand the laws of supply and demand. The laws of supply and demand is that the simple answer is the more that you have of something in quantity and supply, the less value it's going to hold in relation to that of demand. So the more paper that they're printing in circulation, because it's every £1 or $1 to the value of the product, and every $1 or £1 they print, there's one plus debt added to the currency. The more they print in that circulation, the more they face the currency devaluation. And of course, through the currency devaluation, this larger printing of the currency and quantity in circulation, that's what inflation is. It's like a balloon. You inflate the size of a balloon, the balloon gets bigger. Well, it's no different to the quantity of paper. You keep on printing it, it keeps getting larger. That's what inflation is. So naturally, because they're running the printing press and it's the only way they can finance the public sector because they're trying to get rid of the private sector, they're going to be faced with a serious economic problem. The issue being with that is the fact that you're going to have a reaction from society in regards to that. That's why I said when it comes to the specific type of character who's going to continue on aiming to get rid of the private sector, it requires that specific type of character, the dictator basically, to take you there, right? They'll never give you any sort of answer to any of these things. They don't even give you any sort of answer as to how, once the state has nationalised everything, how it's just going to wither away, right? They'll never do that. Instead, they'll take the safe position, back off from all of these questions, and then make it out as if you're the one clueless because you won't debate them on some sort of live debate thing, right? They'll never actually target your actual arguments. Their idea of an argument is calling someone an idiot, and that's it, right? That's their idea of an argument. But ask them questions. Ask them, do you support a monetary-based system? Do you support a moneyless-based system? And if you support either of them, how are you going to solve the economic calculation problem? And even then, how are you going to solve the issue if you're going to stick with a monetary-based system? If you're going to stick with paying people wages, how on earth are you going to do that whilst running the printing press, driving inflation through the roof and devaluing the base of the currency? Well, they've got no answer to that because they're clueless. So the only answer they can actually give to you is basically, oh, you're stupid, oh, you're an idiot. That's it. That's the main arguments against socialism. Of course, you've also got F.A. Hayek's argument on the knowledge problem. They don't know the technical know-how, the technical information of what goes into producing things. So you might think, for example, well, surely we know how to make a pizza. Well, you think that, but how was the oven made? How was all the, tools made in order to produce those things? How is all the machinery that went into producing those things made? All of the process is just like, Murray Rothbard's example of the sandwich. The sandwich, you could say, well, you just simply put two bits of bread together, you buttered them, you put something between the bread and that's it. Well, yeah, very good. But how was the actual grain made? You know, the agricultural process. How was the tractors and everything, the harvesters, the machinery and everything? How was all of that made? How was it transported? You know, all of that technical information. And it's knowing about how much you're going to produce, what is required. You see, that's the information that socialists know absolutely nothing about. They don't know anything because they don't hold the information of prices. And it's not like a case that I just make this up as I go along. We've got historical examples. You look, for example, at the absence of price information signals with British Rail. They couldn't technologically improve the trains in British Rail. They were outdated trains, and the reason why they were outdated is not because of some fashion statement. It's because they didn't have the information of profits and losses to technologically improve. Profits and losses serve far more of a purpose than just signalling where in the market to allocate resources. The profits and losses create incentives. So, for example, let's say you're running a private business and you're in competition, you're in the technology business. Well, at the end of the day, if you end up making losses, that incentivizes you to stop doing whatever it is you're doing to make changes in order to improve. You know, it creates the incentives. That's what creates incentives to stop, you know, allocating resources to that specific part of the market or to specific projects or whatever, because that information is given through profits and losses, but they don't hold that information. They destroy all of that information through price controls. Regardless of whether you're talking about a socialist who speaks about libertarian socialism, an oxymoron, market socialism, another oxymoron, democratic socialism, another oxymoron, the idea of, you know, communism, etc. Doesn't matter what they argue for. You know, along the lines somewhere, they think that prices are somehow knowable. And that's what I was meaning about Karl Marx's labour theory of value. Because, you know, Vosch was trying to make him out as if he was some sort of intellectual. Well, if he was so intellectual, why did he think that the average necessary labour time and labour quantity determined the value of something? And like Kevin D. Williamson rightly pointed out, and just like that of Ludwig von Mises, at the end of the day, Karl Marx viewed price as something knowable, as something fixable, as if you could somehow know price simply by the average necessary labour time and that of labour quantity of what went into producing something, right? And that isn't the real world, because the real world is value is not objective, value is subjective, and you're really only going to determine what value of a product is down to the consumer's demand. And if consumers are not going to spend on something, that's telling you it's not worth anything, regardless of how much labour time and labour quantity you put into something. You understand? That's the flaw behind the Marxist labour theory of value that a lot of these socialists try to defend and contradict themselves in all sorts of positions, regardless of whether they're a libertarian socialist or a democratic socialist, again, oxymorons, or market socialist, all of these things. Socialists basically try to control the economy. They're never going to accept free market driven prices, and that's the natural state of a market economy. You're going to see prices fluctuate, right? That's what you're speaking about when you're leaving it down to the market. That's why socialism's a contradiction of the market, because when you speak about the market with regards to prices, you're speaking about the laws of supply and demand determining what prices are. You're not speaking about controlling prices above or below market value. That's anti-market. These actions you see from government controlling prices, these actions you see from government regulating the market, that's anti-market. market. Market is basically something referring to leaving it down to the laws of supply and demand. That's what the market is in reference to. For socialists to say that they support the market is laughable. They don't accept the laws of supply and demand, folk. They don't even accept that with that of interest rates. They've never accepted market-driven prices. Because that's what you're referring to when you speak about the market. And how you know that for a fact that they don't accept that, look at them when it comes to house prices. Ask them what they want to do about the soaring high market, prices of housing. Most often than not, they argue to try and control it below market value through a price control. It's called rent controls. And that's essentially what you end up seeing. And the capitalist solution to that problem is to build more housing, to ensure that housing quantity keeps up with supply. In other words, accepting the laws of supply and demand. That's not a socialist solution. The solution is getting government out of the market and allowing the market to basically correct that. So this is why the market is a contradiction of everything to do with socialism. Really, all market socialism is basically, like you saw of Japan at one point, it's basically a mixed economy. It's nothing at all to do with, it's just some sort of full-blown socialist economy. And it's no wonder Marxists themselves came out and critiqued the likes of Vosh. Because Marxists, believe it or not, are actually right on this. Marxists were actually correct in critiquing the likes of Vosh. Because Vosh is an idiot. And I don't just call him an idiot just, without an argument. I call him an idiot because he's trying to correlate the market with that of socialism. You don't come more stupid than that. Right? So, everything to do with the argument you hear from these socialists, right? They're going to be faced with controlling prices because they're never going to accept higher driven prices in the market. They always try to control the prices. You even see that evidence of them demanding for higher paid wages through the minimum wage control. If that's not evidence, then what is? Is bloody evidence all right? You can see that they're control freaks. They don't want to accept market-driven prices or market-driven wages. Right? So that's why when it comes down to all their positions, it's anti-market. And when they seek control, they're faced with consequences for their actions, just like you're faced with the consequence of the action of trying to drive the minimum wage above market value. So when you're controlling prices above or below market value, you're faced with consequences, price floors resulting in, surplus waste problems, price ceilings resulting in the price shortage problems. You could see that in many examples. For example, the surplus waste problem created by a price floor with the mass production of oranges that were left to waste in the hot Californian sun. This was, I think, back in the 1970s or 1980s. You saw this surplus waste problem. You could look at the surplus waste problem of the, moleskin pelts in the warehouses in the Soviet Union that was created by a price floor. Again, that's created through government price controls. You could look at the food shortage crisis in Venezuela or Cuba or Chile in the early 1970s as an example of the food shortage crisis, or the blackouts. That's another example, the blackouts that occurred because of the price ceilings. All of these things happen because socialists don't accept the market's driven price. The market, in other words, they don't accept the market. They try to control the market because they don't accept the market. When you're controlling something, and this is what they don't understand because they're too ignorant to understand it, when you try to control prices, when you try to control the market, that is you centrally planning. So that's what you're doing. You're centrally planning prices. You're centrally planning it through the government. The government's the one who's centrally planning what the price will be. They're too stupid to comprehend why their market socialism really is just an argument for economic central planning, and they're too thick to even understand that. I hope that really covers everything for you, and I think even Christian Yemyets touched upon an interesting point, that when it came to these socialist regimes and these workers, if they ever decide to give up working and decide to try and leave the country, the socialist views them as traitors. So in other words, they try to punish them because you're working for the collective. And again, like I said with socialists, they try to redefine everything. So in other words, they try to correlate socialism with personal ownership of possessions. Socialism's about collective ownership, folks. Even in the dictionary definition, it is the very reason why when it came to, and I've really felt sorry for Sargon. Sargon's a nice guy and everything, and from what I can see, he was getting frustrated arguing with this absolute numpty, so to speak. And when he started arguing about that to do with UKIP and the far right, this of course being Vosh, he was going down the road of saying that definitions mean nothing, that you could just make up language. Well, if that's the case, then we can redefine the word close to mean open and redefine the word open to mean close. I mean, this is the sort of stupidity you're dealing with. There's a reason why dictionaries exist, and there's a reason why words have meaning. They have to have some meaning at least in order to make some sense of something. So the most common dictionary definition of socialism, the reason why they reject that is because that is socialism. That's why. So, you're never really going to change their mind on anything. I would love to see them try and defend such a position of running the printing press to finance their economy. How else are they going to do things? Are they going to get people to work for free, like electricians and people who work from dangerous heights, etc.? Are they going to get them to work for free? Or those long distance lorry drivers who do the lorry driving, carrying dangerous chemicals in the back of their lorry? Are they going to get them to work for free? This is why you just laugh at these people, because they don't understand a single thing of what they're talking about. And that's really it. That's socialism in a nutshell. It cannot work. It does not work. It's an irrational ideology. I don't really need to go into the human nature argument because it defies human nature. You can even see that by people demanding higher paid wages, etc. Yeah, you understand. So if you've got any questions you would like to ask, comment in the comments section below and I'll be sure to get back to you on that. And hopefully I can answer anything that you have on that to do with why socialism is a flawed economic system, or shall I say it's a political ideology. So if you've got any questions you would like to ask, fire away below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you for watching. I shall talk to you later. Cheers.